So thank you so much for being with us here. And so you've had experience taking scientifically valid ideas and bringing them into the communities with real world patients. And I'd love to learn some about your experience and so challenges, obstacles, successes that you may have had in that process.
Sure, happy to. Thanks for having me, Danielle. And it's been a pleasure to hear everyone else's input. I would say, when I'm mostly going to be focusing on my time at Verily, but I will say before I joined Verily, I was extremely enthusiastic about digital health because I had a fantastic experience with co-design and creating a digital platform for people with schizophrenia. We had tremendous engagement. We were dealing with really tough issues. About, I would say, a third of the patients in our trials were not in any other treatment, yet we're engaging in our digital tools. So I was really enthusiastic about the potential. So when I went to Verily, I thought, okay, this is a sister company to Google. We are going to have all the resources in the world, and it's this exciting intersection of technology and healthcare. And we were not shy. I mean, we wanted to tackle some of the most intractable problems in healthcare. And my role as behavioral health lead was, overseeing a lot of our work in the mental health space. I would say about 6 months in, the opioid epidemic was raging. And it was not my background. Most of my experience was in serious mental illness. But we thought, if we're going to be focused in the behavioral health space, we need to do something related to the opioid epidemic. So we had these Silicon Valley ambitions. We're going to end the epidemic. We're going to leverage, our influence and technology and talent, and wield those tools, against the human toll of addiction. And we thought we could do some of this by addressing the knowledge gaps in the field. So really truly understanding, what are the care pathways? How can we make care more precise, proactive? And we thought we would do this by developing, a learning health system and to deliver this through a tech-enabled care center. So an actual clinic of the future and build some exciting tools and take evidence, best evidence-based treatments and put it all together. And we wanted to do this in the real world, and actually in the epicenter at the time, which was Dayton, Ohio. And we went to that community and said, listen, we want to invest in your community. We want to build this learning health system with you. And the community they welcomed us, surprisingly, yet there was some caution. And I don't know if you guys know Dayton, Ohio, but this was one of the many communities that Mark Zuckerberg, on his tour across the US, he went there to try to understand, what are real Americans like, so in many ways, Dayton, Ohio is supposed to be emblematic of, I guess, the American values. And while people may not realize it, Dayton, has a long history of innovation. They actually have more patents per capita than any other city, which is really driven by some of the early work by the Wright brothers and then the development of the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And they're just constantly pumping out patents. So you had this spirit of innovation, but then they have a really interesting history where, in the 50s and 60s, it was roaring, tons of innovation, patent after patent. But then after that, in the 30 years later, there was precipitous population decline. So people were leaving, the Fortune 500 companies left. And the reason I give some of that history lesson is because it sets the context for the culture and the mindset of the community we were coming into. So, the combination of a community that understands innovation and embraces it, but was feeling kind of burned by companies. And actually, if anybody has seen the American Factory documentary on Netflix, it also showcases Dayton, Ohio, and another story of a big company coming in promising a lot of change, and then it doesn't go so well. So we were like, we knew the history going into it. We're like, we are not going to be one of those. And actually, to be honest, we were very committed, and we continue to be embedded in the community. We ended up creating a nonprofit organization called 115, and then Verily contracted with 115 to provide the technology and the data analytics to fuel that learning health system, to discover and help, as many people as we possibly could. We also partnered with an existing community behavioral health center, the largest in the region. And we thought, okay, we're not going to be in the business of delivering care. We'll let, the clinicians do that. And, so everybody was at the table and saying, we want to do this, we want to do this. And we thought, okay, everybody's going to swim in their lane. We're going to provide the technology, they're going to provide the care. There's going to be this nonprofit that's going to be based in the community. We engage community leaders. But what we started to quickly realize is that the digital tools alone that we wanted to launch into the clinic were not going to affect really deep systemic issues in our mental health system. So, for instance, like one example is we said, okay, we want to tackle the quality problem. And then we want to understand, like engagement is one of them. So dropout is a big issue. We can't even learn anything about people's outcomes if they don't stay in care or stay engaged, maybe in our tools at least, even if they're out in the community. So that was one of the first things we wanted to target. And we created what we thought was a really great tool, which was like this analytics engine that would identify people who were at risk of dropout, those who actually had successfully engaged. And so instead of trying to manage the entire patient population, we were able to inform the care team, hey, just reach out to these like 50 patients. Those are the ones at most high risk of dropout, instead of 500 in their monthly roster. And what we saw is that, at first people were like, this is great, this is fantastic. And there was some momentum to like reach out to those 50 people, but then there were no changes to the workflow. There was often another clinical issue that was taking precedent. There were distractions. There was, also that wasn't financially valued. So like, the clinic was getting paid, actually, the more people that would come through. It wasn't so much whether, like, you didn't need to have people stay engaged to get paid. Mm-hmm. And so we realized, gosh, there's so many issues at play. This is a lot harder. and it was very humbling. And so I just want to say, and so there was like that issue. And then I think culturally it was like a lot of change for this clinic, and we came in wanting to change everything. And here's some new technology for your patients. Here's a new tool for you guys to use to manage your work. And here's a bunch of data to help inform your care. And it just from a cultural perspective, it was a major clash. So yeah, I see you, Danielle, go ahead.
I was going to say, and it sounds like you have two different cultures, really. So the culture of the community, meaning the people, the patients, but then also the culture of the clinical staff and how the clinical is managed, and what the economics of clinical practice is. And so, I mean, do you have advice for people who are stepping in that situation? It's a big problem that you try to tackle.
It's really hard. And, obviously I had a great digital health experience in my early career because I was controlling everything and working outside of the system. So in many ways, it was like a good experience where I didn't have to manage how is care being paid for, managing a whole staff. And I think that's why a lot of the digital mental health field has moved outside of the existing care system, because it's hard. So I guess if you're setting out to innovate, there's kind of a choice you need to make around, do you want to innovate from within or outside? And if you're and there's pros and cons for both. So I'm not advocating for one or the other. I used to be a big, let's go do everything outside. And then I was like, we have to do everything inside. And now I'm like, I don't even know what I really think anymore. But so just know though, if you are trying to innovate from within, do not underestimate, I guess, the challenges. And I would say you absolutely have to have incentive alignment across the board, because it's harder to change within if you don't have every stakeholder trying to achieve the same goal.